Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back from the lunch break. Welcome to this afternoon's sessions. Can I remind you again about the competitions on Twitter, and there's the Padlet as well. If you haven't seen the Padlet, it's on the big screen just as you leave the exhibition. First up this afternoon is Rhys Davis from the University of Leeds. He's come into higher education from a background outside academia. He was formerly the IT director at William Hill, the bookmakers, and the supermarket chain Morrison's. Hand over to Rhys now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oops, it's a bit loud. But at least it'll wake you up in the graveyard slot straight after lunch. So I'm one of those new IT directors that Dean talked about earlier, that's been brought in to introduce some change to IT services. I've been in the sector about 4 years, and as Jenny said, prior to that I was IT director at William Hill and Morrison's. And those are both sort of great customer-focused organisations. And that emphasis on sort of customer service has informed my approach and has been instrumental in shaping my view of what services IT should deliver for our university. So as you'll see, my presentation's called Supporting the Business, Enabling Through IT. And this is about how IT is working with people at Leeds University to add value to the business. You'll see I like pictures because I think it's easier to engage with people through pictures, and once you get a dialogue you can start to talk about stuff and communicate and engage better. So I'm going to talk about the journey that I've gone on over the last 4 years and show how I'm seeing service improvement as a key part of a much bigger change programme. So, and what I've heard over the last couple of days is that hopefully this will resonate with some of the things that you're interested in and have been discussing. So, it works, good. Background and context. So, when I came along, there was a general frustration and general dissatisfaction with the services being delivered across the institution by IT. There was a quote that the Vice-Chancellor gave, was that they were spending tens of millions of pounds on money on IT, and the deans and the academics weren't particularly happy with the services that they were receiving. The second element was that the University of Leeds was wanting to go on an ambitious transformation programme. Not that they were like maggots, but you know, it sort of gives you a view of what we're trying to get across. It's a development programme, and they were looking for sort of a change agent to come along and help them on that journey. So that sort of created the opportunity for me to come on to the University of Leeds and try and help them move forward. So when I started to look at the sector and understand, or try and understand what was going on, I found that I started to review the prevailing landscape and the environment. So there were a number of things that I expected. I expected there to be a bit of a challenge, to be a duplication of service, inconsistency across the university, because we had 9 faculty IT functions, we had a central IT function, we had a service team in the library, a team in the student admissions area, all doing IT, all to their own standards or different standards, and doing it inconsistently, and the university wasn't particularly happy with that. There was also a lack of governance and a lack of control and a lack of real pace to doing change. So that's sort of what I expected. What I didn't expect was just the scale of the problem. You know, there was more people doing IT in the institution than even the executive thought there was, because there was lots of people doing stuff that weren't necessarily part of the IT function. We had a fantastic legacy capability, so pretty much every technology that was out there we had a version of somewhere. And a couple of years before I joined, we had over 40 different email systems at one point or another across the institution. So it's just an unbelievably complex infrastructure to try and support. You know, some of the other things that I didn't expect this phrase or this concept of academic freedom, you know, which seems to be used by academics and service functions as an opportunity just to go off and do what they want, which is a bit of a challenge. And I also was aware that when talking with the IT guys, they'd been going through this thing that we called change fatigue. They've been going through a number of transformational initiatives for the previous 11 or 12 years, and none of them have really come to any fruition. So there was a sort of skepticism in the IT function as well about whether this change program was going to deliver anything. So those were a couple of things that I didn't really expect. I also started to look at the environment, and by that I mean sort of the broader picture. So, you know, bear in mind this is in 2010, so there was sort of the emerging discussions about cloud and all that that meant. There's the fantastic consumerization of technology, the bring your own devices. This whole growth of data and this big data initiative that's going on at the moment. A raft of regulations which seem to be dumped on the HE sector by those people who think they should know better, and expecting us to respond very quickly and frequently try and understand what they're trying to get at with loosely defined things that we have to comply with. There was the time I joined, there was the introduction of the £9,000 fees and all that that might mean. There was also significant cutbacks from the centre. And so the environment was going through a lot of transformational change. So that was, all of those things were going to impact what we were trying to do at the University of Leeds. And then I looked at the HE sector, and I thought, well, okay, let's just try and understand what's going on in the sector as well. One of the things that surprised me was when I asked people what good IT looked like, I wasn't able to get a clear or consistent answer, and that was from anybody at any level in either our institution or across the sector. So there were pockets of good IT, but there really wasn't a great view of what good IT looked like. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't think there was a huge amount of IT leadership across the sector. Bear in mind this is 2010, and this isn't a reflection on UCISA, because I think UCISA's done some great stuff in the last 4 years or so. But there was just there was a void. I've talked about academic engagement. That was inconsistent. Everybody wanted what they wanted and could justify it, but they didn't really want to be part of anybody else's solution. Everybody was happy to share services so long as it was going to be their services which were going to be shared, rather than somebody else's. Standards. We've got every standard you might imagine, but they're not consistent. They're not used properly. What else? A lot of change going on. Funding and control. That was just like the Wild West from my experience. In the commercial world, it's relatively easy to understand where the money comes from and where it goes. Here, it's a challenge. So you get all the different research councils offering money. You get the universities seemingly focused on a 12-month investment cycle where they seem to have quite a bit of money to spend on capital, but very little money to spend on the operational support. So you get all these great ivory tower technologies built, but very few people to deliver the services and make it sustainable over the sort of the medium to long term. And supplier engagement. That seemed to be coming from the context of the commercial world, that seemed to be quite underdeveloped. So, you know, one of my early conversations with a key vendor who will remain nameless, but I said to them, you're telling me that you've got an end-to-end service which spans from sort of outreach for students right through to when a student becomes an alumni. You say you've got an integrated capability. That sounds to be just what we would like at the University of Leeds. Please show it to me. And they said, what do you mean? Well, I said, you must have a customer somewhere, either in the US or in the UK or anywhere around the world that's used this product, if it's so good, from an end-to-end basis. Please introduce me to them. And they said, oh, well, we haven't got that. And I said, well, you must have it back at head office where you've got this integrated capability. So you can mock up a student journey from, you know, effectively outreach right through to once they've graduated and become an alumni. And they said, no, We haven't got that. And I said, well, why not? They said, well, nobody's ever asked us for that. I said, well, OK, I'm asking, and I'd like to see it. And 4 years on, I still haven't seen it. It's amazing. So that's what I mean about the relationship. So the suppliers aren't really helping us, but similarly, perhaps we're not helping ourselves by asking some of the difficult questions. So anyway, that was sort of the view of the HE sector. Lots of challenge, lots of sort of opportunities. OK, so we've got lots of things that I didn't expect. We've got a whole load of transformational change going on. We've got a whole load of challenges and opportunities in the sector. And then we've got the ambitions of the University of Leeds. This is their strategy paper. And it's one of the things that actually attracted me to the University of Leeds, because they were able to define their strategy on a single page. Now, I've seen other people who have presented their strategy earlier on a single page. Bear in mind, this was developed in about 2006-07. It seemed to be a good distillation to me of what the university was trying to do. And in looking at IT across the University of Leeds, there was no mechanism for engaging the things that we were doing in IT with that strategy. There was no engagement, no alignment, no real relationship. So that was one of the things that was important to me. If I was going to develop a strategy and a vision, then it absolutely had to be to support the business of the university. So all of those things, to me, created this cliché of a perfect storm. It is a bit of a cliché, but it was true. Everything was changing or was about to change. So quite a nice task, really. How do we sort of try and create some sort of order out of that chaos? One of the things that was said to me was, you can go off Reese, you can do whatever you want, but don't upset anybody. So I thought that was a real personal challenge. We are making progress despite that challenge. So the first thing I wanted to do was try and create a vision. And having created this vision, try and create a plan such that we could implement that strategically. So what does that mean in practice? Now, this is what I euphemistically describe as a content-rich slide. There is lots and lots of information there, but fundamentally what I was trying to do here was to basically get on a single page what the One IT strategy is supposed to be. So it's a distillation of the slides that you've seen earlier. So over here it's basically talking about the objectives and the drivers and the challenges that we've got to do. It talks about values and principles, because these are the things that are going to inform the way in which we operate. It talks about how it'll be different when we've delivered this One IT strategy program. It's got this thing which we're calling a word wheel, which is just really a series of soft measures which sort of describing the words that people in the institution will be using when we're starting to deliver the services which we feel that they need and they feel that they want. So things like senior managers will say the IT service is now efficient, it's measured, it's in control. The academics will say it's collaborative, it's trusted, it's inclusive, it's credible. The students, well, I can get at it any time, any place, anywhere. It enables me to learn. The IT guys will say, well, I've now got respect, I've got professional career paths, I've got career development, I operate as part of a team, I work to a consistent set of standards, and everybody says it's delivering value for money and it's transformational. So that's sort of the type of target that we want to try and get to. And then over here, we've effectively described all the elements of IT, and I've basically done a RAG report on it. So that includes the IT strategy, people assessment, processes, services, infrastructure, and enterprise architecture. And they're sort of assessed in reds, ambers, greens. You wouldn't believe how difficult it was to create that picture. That took about 8 months. And then, simplistically, we've got where we'd like to be, or where we could be if we deliver this transformational program. And it's a bit trite, because they're all green. But effectively, what we're trying to say here is that we should be trying to deliver world-class solutions where we need to be world-class, i.e. in the student experience, in the research support. But for sort of back-office systems, they just need to be good enough. So HR and finance, we don't need to be world-class, we just need to be secure, safe and reliable. So if that's where we were a couple of years ago, and this is where we want to be, all this stuff in the middle is what we've got to do to get from here to here. So that's about keeping the lights on. It's about developing projects. It's about supporting strategic projects, and then it's about delivering this One IT strategic program. So we communicated that around the university. We did lots of roadshows, went to various leadership forums, faculty exec committees, etc., and pretty much everybody's seen that and sort of can refer to that and understand what this means for them, because they can understand where they are on that picture, and so they can understand what really is going to happen. So this is a plan. You've seen plans before, but fundamentally this is about the things that we had to do in order to, so I'll shrink that slightly, in order to sort of get from the left-hand side of that previous slide to the right-hand side. So we've created 6 or 7 work streams: a people and culture work stream, a service management work stream, because that's fundamental to what we want to do, enterprise architecture, process improvement, governance, and a communications deck. So those are all the things that we needed to do in order to do that transformational program. So in essence, what we've ended up doing is going back to first principles across many of these particular areas. And I'll talk a little bit about each one of these pictures in a minute. So in order to deliver this transformational service program, it's not just about putting a few people on an ITIL course and expect things to be brilliant as a result of that. At the University of Leeds, we've got to try and sort out the governance, the enterprise architecture, the strategy and the service delivery, the people, the sort of the metrics that are going to show how we're progressing, and then the sort of the processes from a project management perspective to try and make sure that we can get there consistently and transparently. So it starts off with people, really, because fundamentally you can do fantastic IT, you can give people the best kit in the world, but if the people are still operating in the old ways, then nothing will change, because they'll still make the same decisions and they'll still have the same relationships. So what we've tried to do here is just basically distill at a very simple level what the One IT program is about. And what we're trying to get over to people is that it's an ethos, it's a way of working. It's not meant to be too prescriptive. It's also the name of the transformational program. It's the name of the organisation. So basically, the key values for us are to try and make sure that people understand ownership, they can network, they're enthusiastic about what they do, they can be innovative, and that what we do is transparent and visible to people. And then it's underpinned by the university values of integrity, inclusiveness, professionalism, excellence, and community. So we're trying to go through on a cultural and developmental program to get people to start to reach out to each other and start to communicate and work together. Quite simple to say, really quite difficult to do. This picture is really the distillation of the One IT strategy, which is really about trying to get the university to be clear about what it wants to do, what its objectives are, and to be clear about what the outcomes are whenever it kicks off a piece of work. Whenever it does a strategic program, we need to be absolutely clear about what they're trying to do. That is incredibly hard to get the institution to define what the outcomes are, because they keep coming up with these spurious business cases trying to say 0.23 of a person. You know, how the hell are you going to say 0.23 of a person? You can't. What you've really got to try and do is to talk about outcomes, which is really, you know, if you've got a student admissions process and at the moment it's taking 6 weeks to process an application, what I want the users to say is, well, I want that to be done in 4 weeks or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I want this sort of visibility. So if they get them to define those outcomes, and you can deliver services which can support that. So we have to work with the institution to make them be clear about what their outcomes are. And what that effectively do, well, that creates the demand for IT. So if we understand what we've got to try and do, and the university understands what they're commissioning, you've got a fighting chance of delivering it. So if we get the demand understood, we then need to get the controls in place, which is why we need the governance. We also then need to assess the risks and issues. Now, at the University of Leeds, we're very good at understanding what the risks and issues are, but we're not very good at following up on the implications of that. So we'll identify the risks and issues at the start of a project, and then talk about it occasionally, and then at the end of the project we'll say, oh yes, that was a problem, wasn't it? We're not particularly good on doing the mitigation. And the other bit is to try and create a flexible supply of IT resource. Because one of the things I kept hearing was that the users or the business would have demand for something, and then the guys would say, well, I'm working flat out for 2 years, it's got to go to the end of the queue. And the users would say, well, that's not good enough. And the IT guys would say, well, that's all I can do. And the users would say, well, OK, that's not good enough, I'll go elsewhere. So because you're not getting that dialogue, because you're not engaging, it creates the demand for our users to go off and do other things, unsupported, not structured, and then eventually they'll come back and expect you to support it because they don't know how to do it properly. So all of this is underpinned by this bit in the middle, which is, again, it's about the one IT service doing what it says it will. That's really the Ronseal bit there. So I want users to think of us in terms of Ronseal, in terms of we will do what we say we will when we say we're going to do it. And that process is underpinned by ITIL. We're putting pretty much everybody in the IT function through ITIL awareness courses, and then we're putting a number of people through foundation, and we've just put about 15 people through a very intense ITIL boot camp, and we're starting to embed those processes in the institution. We're moving our help desk capability from Heat across to ServiceNow, and a picture of Sally and the team who've engaged in the Service Desk Institute process. And fair to say, I think you're enjoying it in a very challenging sort of way, but it's having a real material impact on the experience that the students have, because they're the main users of the help desk, and the users from an academic and a research perspective. That's been tangible, and I'm very pleased that the team are really enjoying doing that, taking us on that journey too. I touched on governance. This is, whilst it might look a complicated picture, it's far easier, far simpler than that which we had before. Fundamentally, from my perspective, we're splitting IT into the IT that does service delivery, which is the day-to-day services, focused on business outcomes, and change. And it's all coordinated effectively through a design authority and a PMO that's supported by enterprise architecture and others. And the change comes in through the user base, through external, from government, or technical. So that way we could just control the way in which we're doing change. And that's probably going to take us about 2 years to bed in, but it's starting to have some sort of impact already. Enterprise architecture. This is really an interesting slide from my perspective, in the sense that when I started on this journey, enterprise architecture was not a phrase that was particularly well known across the university or even across IT. What we've done is to be able to describe, through visualizing in simple terms complicated processes, we've been able to play back to the university how the university works, where the challenges are and where the opportunities are. So this is a student education program, but fundamentally what we've done is we've said these are the business processes which the business leaders need to understand. These are all the applications that are supporting those processes. Whoops, sorry about that. And then below it you've got a whole load of technology. But the beauty of this is it enables you, when you're having a dialogue with an executive member or a head of service or a project manager in one of these process areas, maybe student education, and they say, I want to change that, you can very easily say, well, the impact is here, here, here. And they start to get an understanding of the scope and the complexity of the program, and they start to understand that you're playing back to them, from a business perspective, the implications of the change that they're wanting to do. And that's one of the challenges that we've had at Leeds, is just understanding the scope of the complex landscape that we've got, so that when you make change you can understand how you're going to deliver it. So that's been very well received at an executive level, and they're starting to rely on this to start to make some quite significant strategic decisions. The other thing we're introducing is project management. We pretty much had every flavour of Prince, Agile, and whatever else you want to name. So what we've come up with is basically a comparatively simple approach to project management, because irrespective of the methodology, project management only does 5 things. Basically, you've got a discovery phase, a definition phase, a design phase, you then develop it, and then you deliver it. And what we're trying to do is to create a common vocabulary to enable people in the business to talk with people in IT, and to have basically a stage gate process that allows us to go from the opportunity to the definition and then to the design in a staged manner. Previously we weren't doing that. And this has been quite well received as well, because everybody now understands, or they're starting to understand, where they are in that 5-step process. I said I'd rattle through it because there's lots to sort of cover. And then a load of metrics. It's really important to try and understand where you've been, where you want to get to, and the progress that you're making. These aren't meant to be used as beat-up tools. These are meant to be used just to be transparent as to where you are, with a view to giving the project managers the support that they need when they've got an issue. Because frequently, and historically, they've been concerned about raising an issue because they feel that they're going to get blamed. It's not about blame, it's about understanding where the issues are so that you can resolve them, and trying to make it transparent across the institution. So, that was establishing the key capabilities, and once you've got the basics right, you can start to do lots of other things. So this is just a flavour of some of the things that we're doing. We've also supported the YHMAN network for Yorkshire and Humberside, and that's led us to develop some shared services. So I'm just scanning over this really quickly. So this effectively is a triangulated data centre spanning Leeds, Met and Sheffield, which it was the world's first it was the UK's first triangulated data centre, but that's one of the things that you can do when you're starting to work effectively and collaborate. We support the N8 research universities. So we've got high performance compute at Leeds that supports some of the research activity across those 8 universities. Some of you will be familiar with that. But some of the numbers there are quite stunning. Those account for about 17 to 20% of all the research in the UK. And the impact that those collectively can have is quite significant. And I would expect there to be more sort of collaboration as we move forward over the next few years. Once you get sort of these processes in place, you can start to address some of the bigger challenges like research data management. So that's a problem across the sector, and we're now starting to get some leadership on trying to come up with some resolutions to that particular challenge. This is something which the YHMAN organisation, the people who did the network for Yorkshire Humberside, have developed. Is now as part of a Janet framework. So this is basically secure storage in the cloud, fundamentally for researchers or for people who've got high value data. So if you want to find out about it, just Google Univault and see what you can see. But it's effectively like Dropbox, but based in the UK, and it's actually easier to use and more functionally rich. This is something which we're doing at Leeds. It's to do with about reaching out to develop what we're calling an integrated research campus, covering the teaching hospitals, covering GPs' records, covering third-party providers as well. The idea being that if we can work together, we can create effectively a safe haven which will provide services for analysing big data across that region, across those areas. And then that will lead into a Smart Cities initiative, and I remember Dean was talking earlier about what's going on in Aberdeen. Similar sort of thing in Leeds, where we're trying to create effectively an opportunity to connect records which are held by the council with records which are held by the health authorities, with records that are held by the universities, so that you can create this common approach to managing and providing support for our citizens. And rattling on, that's sort of it. Some observations and advice. And you'll know all of this. It's a bit dry, but service is a bit of a journey. You do need great people to help you on that journey, and I'm pleased that we've got a few at Leeds, which is good. One of the things that's interesting to me is that continual improvement always pushes boundaries. So, when you've done something which you thought was quite challenging, you've got to challenge yourself and move it to the next stage. So, you can't be complacent. You need perseverance because it's hard work. You need energy because it's hard work. You need support because it's difficult to do it on your own. So, I think one of the things that's really good here is that you've got lots of people sharing great ideas. And, by collectively working together, I'm sure you can achieve more than just trying to address these problems individually. It needs personal commitment. That means from you guys. It needs commitment from the top in terms of giving you the airspace and the opportunity to do it. And one of the things that's interesting about this is you start to develop successes on a small scale. You know what? People will give you more opportunities, and then you can grow it. So, the final observation is it can be done, and from what I've seen, a lot of you are already doing it very well. So, that was it. Thank you.
Thanks there to these. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask? A couple of hands going up. One or two.
You can't, Sally.
Hi, thanks. That's really interesting. The one thing that I particularly like to know is how you solve the flexible resources one. You commented quite rightly. What happens, people want things, you've got a 2-year queue. If you don't give it to them, they go somewhere else. So I'm just really wondering how you've solved that problem and if it really is solvable, because I suspect the more resources you put in, the more people actually want. But if you've got some great solutions, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I think we've cracked it in part. So, and the challenge is if you've got lots of really esoteric legacy systems, that's very difficult to get third parties to come in and provide real support. So really what you've got to try and do is, as far as possible, try and create solutions that are built on, not open, but common standards so that you can get people to come in and support you. So one of the things that we've done with our web team is that, and we use a CMS called Jadu, is that we've engaged with them and they can help us if we've got more demand than we can respond to. And that's been quite successful. So from a user perspective, what that means is the users come to IT and the answer is yes, we can do it. The trick is we don't do it through our resource, we manage the process, but we do it through a third party. And that's the choice that you can have with the institution, because there may be a cost premium in doing that, but it may be a cost premium the institution wants to pay. And so, that's been quite transformational. And what it means is that the skills of your team have to sort of move up a bit so they become more managerial, perhaps, than technical. So that's the sort of the flexible resource that you need to try and create. Okay.
So, Mark Jacko, Open University. I think there's a few of us that have sort of come from the private sector and into the university sector and sort of all struggling, or to differing degrees, with that transition. So from your experience, what would sort of be the 3 things that you've done differently, or if you've learned, or your advice in terms of making that transition?
Pictures really help, to me. I like pictures. And one of the things that stunned me was, in the early days, was going to meetings and being given inches of paper with Word documents. Typically we'd get them the day before with a view to making decisions on them the next day at some meeting. And the introduction to the meeting was, we take it that you've read the papers and we want to move on to the next actions. And you think, no, we haven't. You're going through the illusion of discussion, but it's not getting you anywhere. So what I thought was, if we could distill some of the concepts into pictures or visualizations, what that does is it's easier for people to see what you're trying to get at, and then you have the conversation. And typically, when you do change, it's about the relationships between parts on those pictures. So if you'd have seen the way I was talking about those pictures, I was going from place to place. That's really hard on a 60-page Word document. You know, you can't go from page 41A to page 53, paragraph C, as easily. So if you've got a picture, it starts to hook, and then you start to understand what the real challenge is that they've got. Because, you know, you might think they know what they want, and they might think they know what they want, but frequently they don't. And if you're having a dialogue and you're sensitive to that and you're listening to what they're saying, collectively you can create something which is going to be probably better than you might have done if it's a series of staged meetings. So that's one thing. The other thing was get out of your office and go out and talk to people. And again, that's a bit simple, but in my first month I had 127 meetings, and it was a nightmare. But you know, you went round, you had lots of meetings with lots of people, and I would say about half said, you know what, this is the first time anybody from that building's come out to see me. And so that's very powerful as well. It doesn't really matter what you're saying, but just the fact that you're reaching out and you're starting to engage with them. And the other thing, I suppose, is don't think you understand everything that's going on, because you know, every day I'm getting a pleasant surprise in one form or another, and you just sort of think, okay, fantastic. And the trick is just trying to work out, from my perspective, whether that's part of one of the challenges which we've already identified, or whether it's something new. And I suppose the consequence of that is you can't fix everything from day one. So I think there's three things there. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Ben Fair from Cardiff University.
Hi, Ben.
I'm sort of one of the techie people that has to sort of supply the solutions, and it was just interesting to hear you talk about the term that you'd never heard before, academic freedom. And it's one that is the bugbear of my department, which is, you know, Professor X has decided that he's been given this wonderful research grant,
Yeah.
and he wants this product B. We've already got something that does it, but no, I want it.
Yeah.
It's my money. I'm going to spend it, and you're going to support it. And the feeling from sort of quite a few of my colleagues is that we do tend to kind of suddenly just bend over backwards, wilt like a leaf, and have no kind of say in how we actually sort of, you know, approach that relationship. And, you know, just from your answer just then about sort of understanding their wants and needs is sort of, you know, that sort of idea, how to overcome that. But are there any, you know, do you find having to make sort of lots of concessions for the purposes of academic freedom?
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, it would be easy at one level to mandate a standard, but that would create a confrontational situation which I don't really think that we want to get into. My preference is really just to sort of try and explain to people what they've got out there at the moment in terms of the poor service that perhaps that researcher might have had historically, and show how by working together they can get a better service. And there are going to be some people that are going to come with you on that journey, and there are going to be others that aren't. One of the challenges that I think inhibited us at Leeds was that unless we had a solution that was going to work for 100% of people, we wouldn't move forward. My approach is sort of more along the lines of, well, if we try and get it 80% right, and recognising there might be some of these rogue PIs or researchers that really want to go off and do their own thing, you know what, let them do it. You've got other things to do. And if you can start to convince and show to others that are more willing travellers that you can do things better, increasingly over time that guy's going to become increasingly isolated. And in 3 or 4 years' time, he might say, well, you know, the reason I really didn't want to use your product is because I didn't understand it, I didn't trust that you could deliver, but now my colleagues are getting a really good experience. I'm prepared to take that risk or that chance. Alternately, you might still say, I'm going to do this, and then, and I want this. Then you've really got to engage with the deans and start to get them to help you, because it's the deans who are really responsible for the research outputs of that area. And if that guy feels that he can get better research outputs as a result of buying that particular piece of kit, then he might make a case to the dean and the dean may support him. But if he can't, then I'd expect the dean to support the approach that you're taking. So it's a bit of pragmatism in terms of my view is to win the war, not the battle. So let's just say, okay, if that guy really is absolutely vehement that he wants to do it, then we've got better things to do with our lives. Give him it for the moment, but move on to those people who are more willing travellers. Does that help? So it's a bit of a part answer, but that's sort of how we're working.
It's a philosophy that I think would work well where we are. We tend to end up at loggerheads and not willing to necessarily support or compromise in those terms.
And that becomes very difficult because then you end up in these standoffs. And that doesn't do anybody any good. So if you can sort of come to some sort of waiver and say, yeah, OK, we hear what you're saying, we don't necessarily agree with it, we're going to do all of this sort of stuff, we may come back and revisit in 5 years' time when you've got no more money, that basically gets the dialogue surfaced and you can move forward without that standoff. It is difficult.
Okay, thanks. Probably we should crack on with the lightning strike. There's probably about 5 minutes or so we can have for that, so make the most of that time, and then we'll be back for our next speaker. Can we thank Reece again, please?